Let's please turn to John chapter 4. John 4. This incident happens immediately after Jesus' stop in Samaria, where he had talked to and converted the woman at the well. And then through her testimony to her village, who came out to see Jesus, they believing in him, and he's staying there some days with them. Jesus now proceeds on back to Galilee. John 4:46 to the end of the chapter. Therefore he came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a royal official whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and was imploring him to come down and to heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe. The royal official said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, Go, your son lives. The man believed the word that Jesus had spoken to him and started off. And as he was going down, his slaves met him, saying that his son was living. So he inquired of them the hour when he began to get better. They said to him, Yesterday, at the 7th hour, the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the hour in which Jesus had said to him, Your son lives. And he himself believed, and his whole household. This is again the second sign that Jesus performed when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. So here we have the healing of the nobleman's son. It's a very similar story in many respects to the healing of the centurion's servant, which is Matthew 8 and Luke 7. But the similarities are mainly on the surface. These are different stories, different accounts. And the chronology of the ministry of Jesus shows this happened right after his first trip to Jerusalem. And the centurion servant, that happened a year later at least, happening after his second trip to the Passover in Jerusalem. And so the similarities, as I say, are merely on the surface. They are different stories. And anybody who confuses them is either, confused, or the skeptics who are trying to find contradiction where there isn't any by combining two different stories and then pointing out the differences. That's not hard to do since they're different stories. In any case, what we find is we start with a bunch of curiosity, it seems, at what Jesus is doing, because he rebukes you people who just want to see signs versus this man who has a real need. So first, we start with curiosity and need. This was the place where Jesus had made water into wine. Not all that long after that, Jesus had gone down to Jerusalem, and this is in both in John 2. Jesus had gone down to Jerusalem with those from Galilee, and while being separated from and not interacting with and certainly not submitting for their approval to the temple authorities, and the only interaction he had with them was to run out their cronies who were oppressing the people and fleecing the flock in the money changing and the selling of sacrifices. Now Jesus had, though in John 2, at the end of that chapter, had spent his time among the pilgrims doing many signs and wonders. And so to the authorities he gave them nothing, but to the people he gave many signs and miracles. And these people from Galilee would have been in that crowd. Some of them surely would have seen that, or they would have heard about it. So these Galileans know that Jesus is a miracle worker, and they're hanging out where Jesus had made water into wine. I almost picture a few of them hanging out by the water pots with their cups. When's he coming back? And when's he going to get here? And so we got these people who, it seems, some of them may have been miracle tourists. They're just, on the tour to see the miracles. And that is not what Jesus wants. Now, he had taken a while to get back there, up where they were, because as we mentioned, he spent a couple days with the Samaritans, and it's also in chapter 3 that he had that conversation with Nicodemus. So, they beat Jesus back home. It seems very likely that a number of them were waiting for his return, and we know this royal official, he has people on the lookout, because he finds out as soon as Jesus is back in the area, he knows it, even though he's at the offices 25 miles away. And so the formal network of informants tell the royal official he's there. Well, what does the informal network of the people tell other people? He's there. So everybody knows that Jesus is back. So again, verse 46, it said, when he came again to Cana, where he made the water to wine, there was a royal official whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he'd heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he sent to him, imploring him to come down and heal his son. All right, so they had these people out there who were curious that Jesus is going to upbraid, and Jesus is going to say to them, he says, you people see, unless you people see signs and wonders, you won't believe. And so we start off with a number of people there roundabout who were curious, who had things that, pardon me, they had things that they wanted to see. Today, when it comes to Christianity, there are people who are curious about it. There are things they'd like to know. There are questions they'd like to have answered. There's concerns they'd like to have addressed. Sometimes they like to seek out Christians because they enjoy arguing about or talking about or discussing some of these things on a philosophical or theological level. And sometimes there are people out there who, they just want some answers provided. And so they're like these folks who, there's some level of interest, but there's no real commitment. And so Jesus upbraided them, unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply won't believe. Their connection to Jesus, the Messiah, the person, and the things that he did and taught, they're not there. The curiosity to know something about it, to see these people in action, to see what these guys are up about. There's some interest in that, but there's no interest in a real faith. Now, these are the curious folks. We've seen right in the midst of that, and in the middle is this important man who is in great need. And so when Jesus said, unless you people see, you won't believe, this royal official doesn't seem to think that applied to him. Because he says, sir, come down before my child dies. He said, these people may be here to see a sight. These people may be here to have their curiosity satisfied. These people may be here to fill their cups, as it were. Later it'll be, we know people follow Jesus to get their bellies full. But this man was not for that. This man says, I have a child who is dying. So we find out that he is a royal official, and he's at Capernaum. Now, our local monarch was Herod Antipas. He is a tetrarch in some passages of the Bible, which basically means he rules a fourth of a kingdom. And in Mark 6, he is called a king. And it's one of his men, it appears, who has come down here to beseech Jesus. You don't think about, in the ancient world or even the modern world, do royal officials, do cabinet secretaries today in our democracy, do they go out to little bitty towns in the middle of nowhere? Do they make a long trip out to go see a guy, or do they have a guy brought in? This guy made the trip, 25 miles or so. Again, we're not exactly sure where Cana was, but all our good candidates for Cana are 22 to 26 miles from Capernaum, so we're going to call it 25. He makes the 25-mile trip himself. This man who gets beseeched by people all the time. Sir, do me a favor. Sir, help me out. Sir, could you take my message on to the king? This man who is in that position of life is now the one beseeching. Now the one who has to travel out to the Nowhereville to find the place where the prophet was. And so he goes. And as we find, as we've already seen, he gets that which he requested. Now, I think this helps explain a thing later in the text. In the Gospel of Luke, when Jesus is being tried before Pilate, Pilate finds out that Jesus is a Galilean. And so it says in Luke 23:7, when he learned he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, here's the guy, he sent him to Herod, who himself was also in Jerusalem at the time. Now Herod was very glad when he saw Jesus, for he'd wanted to see him for a long time, because he'd been hearing about him and was hoping to see some sign performed by him. He questioned him at some length, but it says Jesus answered him nothing. So Herod knew quite directly of Jesus' miraculous power because one of his officials is one of the men that had a miracle happen in his house. Here's a boy. Now, I don't know if Herod ever had, bring your child to work day. But if Herod ever had a bring your child to work day, this kid would have been one of the ones who the king would have gone over and put his hand on and said, good little boy, glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Right? I really appreciate your good work your daddy's doing. And then after the kid leaves, he goes, why'd you bring him here? But in any case, Herod knows. And Herod's in this position to know about what's going on, just as this man was. And this man, important though he be in this world, what happened when your kid's sick? How important are you then? What matters? What matters is your kid. And so this man, he cares deeply for his child. He, for his child's sake, has walked himself or had himself carried out there, far away, into the boondocks, to meet this guy who was a carpenter, to this royal official going to the peasant man and saying, please help me out. Please. And Jesus saying, you people just want signs. He said, no, sir, come help my boy. He's about to die. And so we see in life, there are all different kinds and degrees of faith, right? You have some experience with the matter, and so it's not just totally blind faith, but you all were pretty sure we were going to meet this morning at 11 o'clock. Why? Well, one, because we said so, and two, because that's what we've been doing for years, right? But you trusted that we'd be doing that again this morning, right? Did anybody call and verify, hey, Jay, we really doing this thing at 11 today? Over here. There's some that takes a bit of faith that we're going to continue to do the thing we did. When you put your check into the bank, I don't know that teller. Well, actually, here in Mulvane, most of the time I do. Sometimes I've known it for a while, but they got a new teller in there. What do I trust? I trust they're going to put it in the account. Merle's been sick lately. I had to find myself a new barber. You don't know how traumatic that is. But it's an act of faith. I got to find a guy that he's going to affect my looks for the next couple of weeks, and you know how important that is to me, or not. But it's an act of faith. This guy knows what he's doing. Somebody told me he did, and it turns out he did. You may not think so, but I did. All right, so there's these small things of faith. But these small things of faith, of which we go, well, that's not really faith because we have evidence. No, but with our faith, we have evidence too, evidence of the Scriptures. But in these little things of faith, we don't even think about as taking them as things of faith until they don't work out. But on this, our finances depend, our appearance depends, our whole set of activities depend, and we need these levels of faith. And we get all these critiques of faith from the world. The latest one from the critical theorist school is that our faith isn't really faith, it's just an exercise of power. Christianity is just a way for people to have power over the people, which is exactly the opposite, because critical theorist had its beginning in Marxism, but Marx thought the opposite. Marx thought you were a Christian because you had no power. And so it was just an opiate to keep the masses happy, to promise them something, later, not something now, but just promise people Christianity. And so Marx said, this Christianity, it's about being powerless, and we're people of power. The new critical theorists come along and say, no, Christianity is about power, and you guys are using Christianity as a cudgel, as an abusive thing over others. And in either case, we go, no, it's not that. It's our faith in Jesus. It's our connection to this person who lived and walked and helped people. This is what we believe. And then the traditional skeptic comes along and he reverts back to, oh, you're just believing, fairy tales and fables and superstition contained in an old book. And so what is that? What use is that? And all of them miss the fact that the faith that we have, like these little faiths in the world, like the faith that, I have faith the sun will rise. Why? Because it always rose. I have faith in what Jesus promised to do because, well, I trust that word is sure. I think that word is surer than the sunrise. Because one day the sunrise will stop, right? Now, it's a beautiful thing when Tevye sings sunrise, sunset in Fiddler, It's a wonderful thing. But one day the sunrise and sunset will stop. But the Word of God abides forever. And so there's a surer thing than the sunrise and the sunset, as beautiful and marvelous as those things are, and that is the Word of Jesus. When Jesus says to this man, your son will be well, and he's well. That's what we have our trust in. That's what we put our faith in. And so all of these critiques and all of these scoffers' things about faith, they don't move me. They don't bother me because I know the power that is expressed in the things of Jesus Christ. Now, there are things, though, from time to time that Christians will do who claim to have this faith, which will discredit it, I think, more than the critical theorist and more than the Marxists and more than the skeptics. The Christian whose faith is such that, he's the guy he's going to go to church on Sunday to repent of what he did on Saturday, but he's going to do it again on Monday. And he goes, well, I'm saved because I have faith. Just last Sunday, I asked Jesus to forgive me. I believe he will. He promised. Well, yeah, but we saw you Saturday and Monday too. It can't just be a Sunday only kind of faith. It has to be a daily walk, a daily trust. All right, so we had the curiosity, folks, and we got the guy with the need. Let's go and look, and let's just put it all up there. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have 4 things in the text about this official's faith. Remember, John, the guided tour of faith. We got faith that's begging, faith that's persisting, faith that's walking, and faith that's sharing. And obviously, we're going to see the parallels between that and us, right? This is the point, this and us, right? We want to see how that can apply to help us in our life. So we start again with this royal official, this man, the upper crust of society, this man to whom, if he wants dinner, what does he say? Bring it to me, put it on a tray, right? If he wants entertainment, does he go to the theater or they bring the theater to him? Well, he's that class of life where it's all brought to him if he wants it. And here his son is sick, and I'm not sure exactly what Herod's royal health care plan was, but I'm sure it was access to the greatest of physicians of the land, and they could do no good. If there was a royal physician, this man was his colleague, right? If there was a royal physician in Herod's court, who would have known him by name? This guy would have known him by name. But he's out there begging. Verse 47, it says he was imploring. Depending on your translation, you might have beg, you might have beseech, you might have ask, but we have, in this translation, imploring. He has come to Jesus in distress. Now, sometimes when people come to the Lord in distress, we discount that. Well, they're only there because they need him. That's true, but we also sing the hymn, I need thee every hour. But we get on to the guy for needing Jesus. You only come because you need him. Yeah, of course he did. We all did. We all do. Is there anybody who ever came to Jesus truly and faithfully who didn't come in some distress? I mean, how would you come to the Savior of your soul, knowing the guilt of your sin and the weight of your sin? How would you come to Jesus with a completely calm and measured approach? I have this beautiful thing here. It tracks my heart rate. Just imagine you come to Jesus, you encounter Jesus, you ask him to save your soul, you commit your yourself to him in faith and you do all the things that he instructs, and somebody goes back and looks at the monitor of your heart rate, hey, look at that, his heart rate never went up. Well, what? No, of course it did. So everybody comes in distress. And this man, though, he just at least recognizes his distress. If we recognized our state before God without Christ, we would all be in such distress that we would come greatly and immediately. But this is how we live. Like the hymn writer said, so often this is how we live. Years I spent in vanity and pride, caring not my Lord was crucified, knowing not it was for me he died on Calvary. But what was there? Mercy there was great and grace was free. Pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty. So we should all come begging. We should all come in the distress of our souls, recognizing that he is the one and only cure. Well, Jesus doesn't give him right at the first a real positive feedback. He doesn't give him just an immediate open arm welcome. He doesn't do that. He says, unless you people, Lord, I need you to come. Please come. My son is dying. Jesus says, unless you people repent. No, he says, unless you people, here I'll read it right. Unless you people see signs and wonders, you just won't believe. You're not believing people. You're asking, but you're not believing. And this man persists. And this is what real faith does. Real faith persists. Real faith perseveres. Real faith continues. Maybe he recognizes this rebuke wasn't entirely for him. Maybe he recognized that Jesus is right about him. That he really hadn't thought about what he was doing fully. And he hadn't been believing. But he persists, even though this seems like a harsh word. And man, you think about some people. You ask, well, how come so-and-so doesn't go to church anymore? Oh, they got mad at something. Well, what was it? Oh, well, the preacher preached a lesson. Or somebody said something to them. They said, well, what'd they say? Oh, I don't even know. Or sometimes you do know, and that makes it worse. You mean that's what made them mad? That's the lesson they didn't like? Had they been here very long? Well, people like that aren't around here very long. Little minor adversity. Little bit of perceived harshness. People get perturbed, disturbed, petulant. People pout. Remember one time I met a guy, silliest thing I ever saw. But it's just an amplification of the human nature that's in us all. Man was about 25, 26 years old. His mother told him something. I forget what it was his mother told him. But she told him while we were there. Me and another friend were there. And this guy, 25, 26 years old, he just literally started pouting like a 3-year-old. He got up out of his chair and he went and literally sat facing the corner like this. And his mother went over there with a cookie. I mean, we've seen this with toddlers. This guy was 25, 26 years old. And they're doing this while we're there. We think, man, if they do that when we're here, what are they doing when we're gone? But it was weird. Well, petulance and poutiness. And I always thought that was the extreme example of that. And it's been my go-to example of a petulant and sour attitude for years. But now I got Facebook. Now I just got it right there. And the beautiful thing about Facebook is people do that under their own name. You know, it's not like Twitter where you do it anonymously. You got your own name and family connections there and you're acting this way. But imagine if this man would have been petulant. If this man had been pouty. But this man persists. And he won't let people dissuade him. Not even in this case Jesus. By what Jesus said. It's kind of like Matthew 20. In Matthew 20 there's the blind man. In other Gospels, we find out his name is Bartimaeus. There's 2 of them. We know one man's name. But in Matthew 20, as they were leaving Jericho, this is at the end of Jesus' ministry, large crowds followed. And 2 blind men were sitting by the road. Hearing that Jesus was passing by, cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, son of David. And the crowd sternly told them to be quiet. Be quiet. I'm sure sternly had more than just that. Whatever the Hebrew equivalent of shut up is, and worse, I'm sure that's what was said. But they crowded all the louder, all the more. Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. And so, we have to ask, does your faith, does it show these evidences of genuineness in its persistence? Is it one that overcomes setback? Does it care what other people are saying? Or does it say, I need Jesus? Or if there's not an immediate gratification, are we, well, I don't need that. He shouldn't have treated me that way. Come on now. I came all the way out here to see him, and no. Well, I never. No, and you won't. All right, so then what we find is Jesus on this persistent asking and faithful asking. Jesus grants him his wish. Jesus says, yes, you will get as you desire. Verse 50, Jesus said to him, go, your son lives. If I was a royal official used to royal official treatment, this might have been the part where I got mad. Sir, you're dismissing me? No, I dismiss you. No. He said, sir, you can go. He's well. And what does the man do? He believed. He believed the words that Jesus spoke, and he started off. I don't know of a better summary of real Christianity in its infant stages than this statement here. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke, and he started off. Jesus said it? Okay, we can go home now. We can go. Let's go home. We came for what He's promised to give us what we asked for. And so what else would you do? What else could you do? If you believe, if he didn't believe, he'd have to say things like, come with me. I need you to come. Well, let's go see this. Or, are you sure? Right? Or, could you write that down? Got to get a receipt. Got to get a certificate. Is there something here that verifies the healing? Do we have some, where's your paperwork? No, just he believed the word and he started off. Such a wonderful summary of the life in Jesus. Jesus dismisses him, but on the promise of health and wholeness. He'd come all this way. He got what he asked for. He believed he got it. And so he started going back home. He believed. 25 miles back home. And there he goes. And so, you think about the walk out there. Is Jesus still going to be there when I get there? How much trouble is it going to be to track him down? Is he going to help? Can he help? All the concern of the son with a fever that, he's 2 days out there at least, as we see by the time the servants are met. We can tell at least it was a 2-day journey. Is he still going to be okay by the time I get there? How's it going? What's the wife going through? How bad is this? But on the way home, what's the thought? Jesus said he'll be well. And so he walks back home with this one thought in his head. Jesus said it will be well. And do we go that way? Does that summarize our walk in Christ? I'm going because he said it will be well. Well, when he meets his servants, he finds out, yes, indeed, it truly is well. He meets his servants as he is walking back. Verse 51, as he was going down, his slaves met him, saying his son was living. Oh, that's good news, isn't it? He's alive. That's how close this was. The news is he is alive. And he inquired. He said, well, what time did he start getting better? They said, yesterday, 7th hour. The fever left him. So the father knew that was the hour which Jesus said to him, your son lives. So here it is. These servants who I'm sure are in a hurry, right? They're going out there. He's well, he's well, he's well. This is like Paul Revere's ride. They're getting out there to get the message out. And it still takes them a day to meet in the middle. So this guy had walked out there a ways. But he finds the servants. He's well, yes. When? Same time you talked to Jesus. That's when he got well. Jesus had said, your son lives. He himself believed, and his whole household. Now, notice it had said back in verse 50, he believed and he went. But now he gets the message, and what does he do? He believes. So we have, at times, as we mentioned, degrees of faith. We have all these degrees of believing. Sometimes we believe it because it's promised. And sometimes we believe it because it's happened. And we connect these two, that what he said and what happened, these connect. And so it makes for a stronger faith. And this is the way we're to walk. We have so much that has been promised to us, of which yet is still promise. But there's also been a lot of promises fulfilled, haven't they? How many promises have been fulfilled? And so we have the promise with the fulfillment joined. And so we have a believing that that was done. Now, some people are, they don't have gratitude. Some people don't have a lens of faith to view this view. They say, oh, well, that happened. Well, no, it didn't just happen. It happened because he said so, right? The believing in that faith and that promise that went with what was done. So he believed just on the word. Now he believes all the more, like I think Peter would say, of the prophecies. We have the prophetic word made more sure, right? We have the confirmed word. So he believed, and now he believes more. And he shares this. This faith is not now just for him alone. This was a public act. The asking was public. The knowledge of the healing of this son of a very important person, that was public. It was known to everybody who lived there. And so they all believed. And so this guy is one of the more effective evangelists we see, in that he got his whole house to believe. And that does beat some, for sure. And so, this is about trust in Jesus. This man trusted in Jesus, and Jesus came through. So this man is convinced fully by this miracle that's done. I have one more verse up there. It's Luke 8. It's kind of an odd passage in some ways. It mentions that Jesus traveled about going and preaching and teaching, and he went with his apostles, of course. But it also mentions that he had a larger entourage who was commonly with him. And there were some women there who were healed of evil spirits and sicknesses. Mary, who was called Magdalene, from whom the 7 demons were cast out. And then it mentions in verse 3, a woman, I think, there because of her prominence, Luke 8:3, it mentions Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward. And so I've come to wonder, was this guy Chuza? And his wife becomes one of the disciples who follow Jesus around and give him money? Well, you think, well, what would cause you to do that? What if he healed your son? Right? Now, that doesn't mean that this is Chuza. There is things in the Gospel of John. There's a number of times where it seems obvious that John is purposely anonymizing things, not telling you the person's actual name. And it seems like for fear of persecution, partly, in the Gospel. But if this wasn't Chuza and then his wife Joanna, who is the patron of Jesus later on, if this isn't them, that would be people these people knew. So these people would at least have been friends or colleagues with them, right? Because how big is Herod's court? How many royal officials does he have? It's a limited number. So, in any case, why would you go follow Jesus? Why would you be his patron? Why would you support him in his teaching and preaching and his work? Well, what if you knew the goodness of it? What if you'd seen the power of it? I think that would be a pretty reasonable thing to do, wouldn't it? So, I guess the last question for us, do we have a faith like that to share? Having known the sweetness and promises of Jesus being fulfilled in our life and the things he's blessed us with, do we have enough there to share? Are we in the early stage where we just believe and have started off? Or are we now persisting and walking in his way and sharing? So wherever we are in that walk, if it's a true one, we'll be in good stead. And we'll mature to the others in good time if we continue in our faith. So here was this man whom the miracle fully convinced, and that he believed in Jesus, walked in his promise, and shared